What's going on, everybody? Welcome back for another episode of Charlie Brown Politics. As you may know, I am Charles Brown, your host. I want to talk about your favorite backstabbing neoliberal, the one, the only, Alexandria Ocasio Cortez, otherwise known as AOC. If you have not seen recently, she spoke in public in New York City about their migration problem that they're having. And it was pretty hilarious, I might add. So I want to look at this video. It's going to bring up a few topics about the border. And I also just want to point out the blatant hypocrisy of AOC. Point out that she does not really care about the things she says she cares about, like children being separated at the border, and other issues like that. Without further ado, let's go ahead and start this video.
Congresswoman Ocasio Cortez is speaking now. She's angry at the mayor of New York, says he's not showing leadership on the illegal immigrants flowing into the city. Watch.
And that we are joining with the city and state administrators.
Well, thank you. I'm happy to be here with Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio Cortez and members of our delegation, as well as other members from other states that are here to see for themselves what the migration dynamic is in our nation. And what we saw there with children, families, people that want to work, people that are fleeing violence, people that are fleeing.
He saw children that wanted to work.
Environmental disasters. We see so many stories, heartbreaking stories, manifest itself here. But I think these are false.
All right, I want to stop it real quick right there as well. Let's take a step back. He said that these people are fleeing violence. They're fleeing environmental disasters. Okay, we have to just ask why there's so much violence in their country, why somebody would travel to the U.S. That's probably a long journey without probably any money, without any power, without knowing the language. Now, and I'm going to guess that if you look into the history of pretty much most of these people's countries, the U.S. has had some involvement. I'm talking about involvement like overthrowing their government or putting mass sanctions on their country. And we all know that these sanctions hurt the poor and working class people of those countries. So with that, let's continue.
That will take New York City to a better place. Every crisis presents great opportunity. There's hope and opportunity in this building. So I wanted to thank all my colleagues for coming. As you can see, this is a contentious issue, but we are all Americans, and we all believe in the American dream.
Nobody believes in the American dream anymore. This is a myth.
That's the common denominator here, the American dream. We believe in it, and we will fight for it. With that?
Yes, and ultimately, I think that there are 3 points of consensus here that are very important in getting a solution to this issue. The first is that there is consensus here across geography and states on increased federal resources to cities and municipalities dealing with this issue. The second is to allow for work authorizations so that the folks in here can get to work and start supporting themselves as soon as possible.
Yeah, Alexandria Ocasio Cortez needs those workers to come back because she's going to need a couple of servants to hold up her dress at the next gala.
They are prevented from getting jobs, they are prevented from employment, and that is part of the strain on our public systems. The faster that folks can access the work that they're asking for legally, the better we can solve this problem. And the third is extension of temporary protected status for Venezuelans, who are the largest population that are arriving here. So with that, we thank you all, and ready to wrap up?
Oh, man. You know, she probably is going to call those people a bunch of harassing stochastic terrorists, so I hope she has recovered by now. Now, let's look at the last point that she brought up. She talked about Venezuela and how we need to give these people more protections within the U.S. Well, that's kind of funny because if you don't know, the U.S. has had their hand in Venezuela's country for quite some time. Back during Trump's presidency, we tried to put in Juan Guaido as their president over their publicly elected president that they already had, Maduro. And yeah, things didn't work out for the U.S. in that department. And on top of that, we've had sanctions on them, and I think we might even still have sanctions on them. Don't quote me on that part. I'm not quite sure. If I had to guess, though, it'd be a yes. Okay, so what's the point of all this? When all this went down, did you hear a mumbling word from AOC about Venezuela and calling out the military-industrial complex? No, you didn't, okay? And guess what? I have the receipt to prove it, so let's look at this. I have an article from Left Voice, and it says, AOC lines up with Pelosi, Bolton, and Trump in support of coup attempt in Venezuela. The coup attempt in Venezuela, orchestrated by Trump's national security advisor, John Bolton, has been condemned by socialists around the world. Democratic socialist Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio Cortez, however, is siding with Republican and Democratic parties in support of U.S. imperialism. I defer to caucus leadership on how we navigate this. That was how Alexandria Ocasio Cortez, U.S. Representative for New York's 14th Congressional District, responded to a question by the National Review about how she views a U.S. orchestrated coup attempt in Venezuela. The only substantive comment AOC gave was, "Violence is horrible." And that sounds exactly like AOC. The Democratic caucus leadership around House Speaker Nacy Pelosi has offered unlimited support for self-proclaimed interim President Juan Guaido. Pelosi is not, as she claims, interested in the suffering of Venezuelan people. If she were, she would call for an immediate end to the murderous sanctions. And you didn't hear anything from AOC on that either. Pelosi is supporting the attempts by Donald Trump, his national security advisor, John Bolton, and his special representatives for Venezuela, Elliot Abrams, to install a puppet government in Venezuela. 2 months ago, AOC was already calling for democracy in Venezuela, while Bernie Sanders was demanding that Maduro allow humanitarian aid into the country. Both of these Democratic Party politicians who consider themselves democratic socialists were providing a left cover for the Trump administration. The Trump administration's narrative in favor of a coup. These coups in Latin America are always in the interest of U.S. billionaires, the very people AOC and Sanders claim to be fighting in the name of these people. So I think you're getting the point that I am trying to make. When the U.S. was trying these coups and putting on these horrible sanctions, you didn't hear anything from AOC. She went along with it. She didn't critique the military-industrial complex. She didn't do any of that shit. And so, with that, I want to look at another video that always brings joy to my heart, okay? You've probably seen it. It's the one where AOC is going to be crying over, the kids in cages, over the kids being separated at the border. And if you don't know, by now you should. These are crocodile tears, but it's a great video. It gives me a smile every time.
More children to suffer and die in this way. Maria could be here with us, but she is not. Next month she would have been 3 years old. That is a very painful date for me. It's painful to not have her with me and show her what I feel and say what I want for her. I have no words to describe that.
All right, there we go. I wonder what AOC was actually crying about there, God damn. She's a pretty good actor. I'll give her that, So, to point out some more hypocrisy of AOC, she was crying over these kids in cages, over kids being separated at the border underneath the Trump presidency, which is fine, whatever. but you have to, when Biden's in president, you have to hold him to the same standard, right? But of course, as we all know, as soon as Biden came in president, she stopped caring about those kids in cages, and she refused to point out the fact that Obama built the cages that Trump put all these kids in. And so today, there's still terrible stuff going down at the border, and I want to show you that it's still going on. So here we go. We got this from Vera. Children are still being separated from their families at the border. United States immigration law allows people who are fleeing violence and persecution to request asylum at or near the border. In a shameful chapter of our recent history, the United States intentionally separated children from their parents to deter families from exercising this right. Though family separation is no longer explicitly used as a weapon in U.S. immigration policy, it is still a horrifying result. Over the past decade, hundreds of thousands of children have come up to the United States without their parents, and we have not built a system to receive them with compassion and respect. In the fiscal year 2021, a record 122,000 children were taken into U.S. custody without their parents. But far too many of them could have safely remained with their parents or other family members if the United States had a better system, policies, and practices. So once again, do you hear AOC talking about the horrible practice still going on with the border? With that being said, this brings up the issues that are going on with the border and the crisis. And, I don't necessarily have the answers. I don't think necessarily that the border wall is an answer. I feel like if we would just stop putting our hands in other countries, stop overthrowing their government, stop putting on these horrible sanctions, then maybe their countries could have a chance of being more prosperous and actually taking care of their people. And if you look at the history of it, any time that a country, let's say Venezuela, right, wants to, nationalize their oil per se, and give that money to the people, well, the U.S. government sees that, and they do not like it, okay? We normally will try to overthrow your government if you don't let our corporations come in and steal your resources for themselves and a rich people that, these rich men north of Richmond, the gatekeepers that Ice Cube is always talking about. And so what do? We always send in our guys to do what we do, put sanctions on, try to, promote some extremist group to overthrow their government. So I just want people to focus on that point. Why do these people want to come to our country in the first place? And, this also will bring up the issue with the drug cartels on the border and drugs being pushed into our country. And I've even heard some people talk about we need to put military on our border and take on the drug cartels. News flash. The CIA has been working with drug cartels for quite some time. So how about the CIA? How about we just have them stop giving these cartels money and guns? That's rule number one. Idea number two: stop the drug war. Okay, people are gonna do drugs. Guess what? And if you don't make it legal, they're gonna go to other avenues to get it. And usually, these other avenues are people like drug lords. So if we taxed, regulated, and made it safely, people wouldn't have to go to these nefarious people. These nefarious people would not get power and money that you get from putting on a prohibition on drugs. It's the same concept as the prohibition on alcohol. Back when we did that, the mafia gained a lot of money, a lot of power, because people still bought alcohol. Surprise. So these, I just want people to focus on why people want to come over here, and the drug problem can be solved in other ways. Now, are there other discussions along this? Yes. Are the immigration policies of the U.S. fucked up? Probably. I've heard Bobby Kennedy talk about it a little bit, how the cartels are busing people to cities and stuff. I don't have the receipts on that today, but I feel like that people try to just scapegoat the vulnerable here, the people that are migrating into the U.S. And also people always forget that the most amount of illegal immigrants comes from not people crossing the border, but it comes from people overstaying their work visas. And so these are just points that don't get brought up a lot in mainstream media. I hear them from people like RBN, Hardlands Media. Shout out to both of them. People like Jimmy Dore. So shout out for all those. With that, guys, tell me what you are thinking. What's your opinion on the crisis at the border? What do we need to do? What policies do we need to enact? Do you agree we need to stop this drug war that we're having? Yeah, that's just my opinion. With that, like, comment, subscribe, all that jazz, and I will catch you on the next episode of Charlie Brown Politics. Later, guys.